attribute menu. So from what we see here, it looks like we need a few different widgets. We're going to want a widget for that framed value, and I'd like to call that WBP framed value. And then we can create a text value row, basically a row that has text and a framed value in it. And then we can create a text value button row that basically is the same as the text value row, except that it also has a button. And once we have these building block widgets, we can create our overall attribute menu widget blueprint and put all the rest of these in there. Now, of course, health and mana, those should probably be their own widgets. Those can be progress bars. So we'll think about those when we get to the end there. And of course, we'd like our attribute menu to have a button to close it down. So we have that red button with the X on there. So there are a few additional details to take care of as well. So we have a game plan, and our next steps involve first creating that framed value widget. That's going to be a pretty simple step. And then we'll make our text value row widget, after which we can make a text value button row, which will be basically a text value row with an added button. And finally, we can make the attribute menu widget and put this all together and flesh out the attribute menu. So we've got a few steps, but we have a game plan, and we're going to start with step 1 in the next video. I'll see you soon. Welcome back. So we're ready to start working on our attribute menu. So in Blueprints under UI, we have several folders here. For one, we have overlay, and the attribute menu is kind of related to the overlay. We could put it in here, but I'd like it to be in its own folder. So I'm going to make a new folder called attribute menu. We'll put our attribute menu widgets in here. Now, first we need our framed value. So I'm going to make a new widget blueprint. So user interface widget blueprint. These are all going to be based on Aura user widget. We'll select that, and this will be WBP underscore framed value. WBP underscore all going to be based on Aura user widget value. Now, I'd like this to have a size box. So, and for the to size box underscore root just here. So let's go to graph size override value event pre their value box height is set to is varied and height. We can put these in frame properties. And I'll put both box width and box height into our frame properties. And we can take our size box root and drag it out. And we can call set width override, passing in box width. And we can call set height override as well. Also, let's duplicate sizebox root, use set height override, and we're back to 0, namely body 5, and we're going to collect. We're going to need an overlay. And for the overlay, just drag it onto the overlay. And either if you search for flowing for UI, such as MI flow here, and be good. Parenthesis speed for some darkness. Back roughly to how it was. I don't want too much cloud darkness. And if I really want, I can create with how this looks. Just it. That's the root overlay, and this will be image underscore background. So I can add brush and promote this in brush to a variable. Things we've been doing with our other widgets already. We can category of frame properties, and background brush can get a default value if we compile and we search UIBG, but now it's not going to have that blue tint to it. If I connect this and compile, we'll see that it's back to its default. So something to be aware of, a variable, but value if we want to make it. So on child, and we'll call this up. I'm going to have another image. So let's get an image on here. I'm going to put it onto the overlay, but just in front of the background. I'm going to fill horizontally and vertically. And for the image, I'm going to search for border and use border 1. And this one's actually a lower res. I'm going to use a border. And I'm going to go up border. And a border, the actual stretching E for X. And so we have this image. I'm going to rename this to image underscore border. And this can also be set as a parameter, but really, I'm not going to parameterize this for now. I think that's something I'll come back to in the future. I don't want to make this have too many features if I'm not going to use them. So we know how to make variables and parameters using event preconstruct. We'll come back to that if we need to, but I'm going to move on because we need some text for the number. So I'm going to get a text in here and drag that in. And for this text, I'm going to set the default text to a number, let's say 99, so we can see what it looks like with a 2-digit number. Now, horizontal and vertical alignment can be both set to center. The justification can be set to center, and we can change the font of this. And I'm going to choose Amaranth, and I'll lower the size down to about 17. And I like to use outlines, so I'm going to put an outline size of 1. So it's hard to see, but there's a black outline around the numbers. And now we see what it looks like with some text on there, and we have our numbers. Now, this text here should be a variable, and that way we can come in here, and if we wanted to, we could definitely I'm going to call this text value any number of. I really don't. We now have a frame value. We're now the text value row. So great job, and I'll see you in the next video. the overlay. Welcome back. It's under overlay in here, but attribute our frames widget blue WBP. Open that up. We'll have change the width and height, and let's set width to something like 80. We'll adjust these, of course, and for height something like 45. Almost everything here. And let's go to graph size. Second will be box height. Width and a half here. So, and we'll go ahead and make width and height variables construct. We're going to have, and this will float. Now we need to make sure our size box is set. Box width and height. We can put these in their own category properties, frame properties, and we can all set, and we can use go ahead and hook zeros we had for because it maps to function. Put things on top of it, and so we're going to need an overlay and for an image, just drag to fill, and for this go down to black. That's one option. Another is for UI. This is some clouds that we have here, and as you can see, the clouds are flowing, and we have some parameters for some pan change. If we want to change the speed X and Y, and that's the speed for some panning clouds that we're using. And we have cloud darkness as well, if we want to change that to look cloudier. And then, of course, there's this color for the clouds themselves. You can desaturate it all the way, and if you desaturate it all the way and save, then you'll see here in the UI, the tint can be changed to whatever color you want. So Leaps really want it's kind of underscore background, and we can call set brush and promote this in brush to a variable. Things we've been doing with our other widgets already. We can call this background brush. I'm going to go ahead and put these all in the same category of frame properties. And background brush can get a default value if we compile and we search for MI flowing and choose that MI flowing UI. We'll see that it's back to use you can brush, and but this is going to be a parameter that can be set on child blueprints of this if we want to do that. So let's collapse this to a function and border onto the overlay, but horizontally invert one. And this one's actually a lower res. I'm going to use border 1 PNG. That one's higher res. And I'd like to draw this as a border. So I'm going to select draw as and change from image to border. And for margin, I'm going to set these margins to a certain value. I'm going to go up to about 0.5 for all of them. So pasting in 0.5 for all of these. And that gives me a border. And a border is kind of nice because if we take our size box and we change these values, we see that the border will sort of stretch to how we want it to look. Now, if you don't stretch it too much, we shouldn't see a whole lot of actual stretching. But for the rough ballpark size of 80 for X and 45 image, this can also do, I don't want to make labels, but I'm going to move on here. Default text to a number. Now horizontal to center and text on there, and that text for the will cross named value. And because we made the background a parameter, we can frame on there. I think this is good in our app in the next video. now need to make our text value of these for the folder that contains this widget, which is UI attribute menu. Let's make a new widget blueprint here based on Aura user widget row. This is going as boxes. So we're screen to desired, and we're going to make our parameters for width and height for this, changing that to a float and box height. And that's a float as well. And this really could be a width, and that's a float as well. And this really could be a overall base widget that has a size box. It always has one. You could make a parent and derive all your widgets from that if you want to inherit this property. Override. A horizontal box. That's how we can text right into that box. Horizontal align any font you like, and I'm going to set the drag it on in value and just drag it on in. We'll see that it gets stuck right there immediately after the text, which is okay, but I'd kind of like it to be a little bit farther out. Well, there's a nice handy widget called a spacer that can take care of that. If I put a spacer just after it, right here, then I can change the spacer size. If I increase that X value, then I can see that spacer size go up. So right there, we can change that. I can put it at about 50, and that looks pretty good. Now, the longest attribute name is intelligence. I want to see what it looks like. So like that, although the other attributes could have longer names, such as critical hit resistance, that's actually pretty long, isn't it? Looks like. So the size of it, so we can, and at the end of that, if we extend this into a child called a name widget, there are widgets on the name. I think I'll take the spacer and just kind of went back to 450 because at event precon 800. Okay, so let's 40 for the space, kind of fun. I can add new widget. I kind of want to just make some adjustments and make sure that things look good. I kind of want this framed value to fit the news turn here. Some properties. If I want it closer, just align right for horizontal, and vertical can just be centered. And that way, it'll be the correct size, and it'll be by my space. And this is good. In the next video, we'll make the version of this that has a button right there, and I'll see you soon. And if we inherit from this, okay, so let's go ahead and adjust this framed value original size, and it'll be a constant space away from this is going to do it. I think for our text value row. So So this looks good. In the next video, we'll make the version of this that has a button right there at the end. So we'll make use of that named slot. So excellent job, and I'll see you soon. Welcome back. So I'd like to, so we can on widget blueprint, but we're going to choose our there. So we can do button exposed to the, this will be for basically a border behind the button. So I'm going to get an image here. Open the brush. Here's what it looks like. Set it to align center, then there it is right in the middle. And we can obviously change this to whatever size we want, and it's going to get bigger, provided that we don't go too big, right? If I go too big, it's going to hit the bounds of the encompassing size box. So we don't want to go too big. 50 by 50 or maybe 40 by 40 is okay. It just really depends on what you want, but this is our border. And you could draw this as a border, but I'm going to draw it as an image. And we're also going to want a button. So I'm going to search for the button widget type and bring that in just below the image border. And I'm going to take my button and set it to center, horizontal and vertical. And I don't like drawing it as this rounded button. That's kind of default behavior. But for the style, if we expand normal, we see that we can draw as a rounded the image size here. Border. So if I take my border a little bit brighter, by the way, you could browse to these and see what they look like. Highlight as image by default. The others are rounded box by default. And so now we have all of those bit of text widgets, and we're going to put them together into a menu, and we'll do that next. So great job. And Welcome back.
So
We have
great
3
job,
widgets that
and
we're
I'll
going to
see
use in
you
our attribute
soon.
menu. Now we need to actually create that widget that we'll use for the menu, and we'll put that right here in the attribute menu folder. And this one will be a user interface user widget blueprint based on Aura user widget. We'll select that. We'll call it WBP attribute menu. So let's open that. And for this, we're basically going to use the overlay. All this, and I'm just going to change to desired. I need to, but I overlay. That's underscore. Now first, that onto. So we'll have a vertically score log. Pretty good. Now we can draw this as a border, and if we set draw as to border order to see it. border looks like. And I'm going to hard code these to 0.5 for all the margins. And with 0.5, that's going to make them look appropriate. But borders are cool because they adjust as their container adjusts. Are so good. I'd like to have the buttons. I'd like those lines achieve this. That's really wide to be kept on. Let's drag the wrap box right here. On the wrap box itself, I want some text. Drag it onto the wrap box. My text attribute. So I'd like it bigger. I'll go ahead and really want this. So let's go about area. So vertical and horizontal can both be set to fill. I'm going to take my text for the padding. That's going to set it for all four of a lot more, like 800. That way, I have one that has attribute points. It's going that we can adjust. Remember, the text value row has parameters box width and box height, and those can be adjusted. Now, box width is set to 800. Here in our attribute menu, it looks a little bit too large. So if I want, I can make box width and box height visible. Here, I can compile that. And here in attribute menu, with this widget selected, we have our properties. We did not put them in their own category. So I'm going to put them in a category of row properties. We'll do that for box width and box height. Row properties, compile. Back here in the attribute menu, we can search for that row properties category. Here it is way down at the bottom. And I can go ahead and just make this a bit smaller until I get a good value. It looks like 750 is good. Okay, so it says critical hit resistance, but we're going to want to be able to change that value, of course. We're going to want this to say attribute points so we can see how many attribute points we have. And then I'm going to want a spacer under selected this widget, Control V, and it put this going to be one of our primary attributes. So attributes, we could move it up right here. We can drag it up beneath it. See, there's a spacer there. Now we have primary attributes, spacer, and then these two spacers right there. And it looks like 750 is the perfect size that I'm probably going to want our box width and set its default value to 750. There, perfect. So I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to take of them, and then click on the spacer, Control V, and that'll copy and paste both of them. Now it looks like I got two spacers, so I'm going to delete one, and we need one more pair with a spacer and a widget. There we go, and we have 4. Okay, so that's great. We could also give them individually, each their own padding. That itself should be smaller. We can set the padding overall to, say, 40, like so. Keep in mind, though, we're using size boxes, and size boxes mean we want to set the actual size to accommodate width here. Good value width to 720 is the name of the game here. Okay, so we have our primary attributes, and the secondary ones will go beneath it, but a scroll box. So how do we do that? It's going to be the size of the... First, I'm going to have a size box. The size box itself, I'm going to set the size for. As soon as I make it bigger than nil, it'll start to take up its own line. And the size box, I'm going to rename to sizebox_scroll. So we know that this is the size box for our scroll box. I'm going to check width and height override, and as soon as I give it a bigger width, it's going to take its own line. I'm going to give it some height here. And we can even give this a smaller width and make it center, and fill empty space is going to make it centered like that. And if we really want, we can put a spacer between what's above it and it. So we can put a spacer right here in between. That gives us a little more room, and we can adjust the size here. Now this is going to be a scroll box, so we'll go ahead and drag one in. So we'll search for scroll box and drag in a scroll box right onto size box widgets onto the scroll box and box here, a row, and as a set size text value, one there. And we're going to want one by going to my attribute set. I guess I can count them right here in get lifetime replicated. So I'm going to, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And notice there's a scroll bar now, and it kept getting smaller the more of these that we placed here. Now, it looks like the font could be a little smaller. It's taking up too much set. For this, we're going to need to have a function to properties here. A little too much. The text here could do it. So we'll make some adjustments in the videos to come. For now, this is a good start. And before we wrap up, I think I would like at least a background image behind everything here. So right here at the very top, just inside the overlay, I'd like one more image for the background. I'd like it to go just above the background. And this is actually the border. So I'm going to rename this from image background to image border. And behind it here, this one will be the image underscore background. This one will fill the entire thing, although I'm going to in a little bit. So I'm going to want a little bit of padding. 5's too much. Let's try. I think 1 is good. So we'll have a little bit of padding there, and we can give this its own color. I'm actually going to choose that flowing, and I can set its tint a little bit if I want that. I think I'll set it a little darker like that. And now we have a nice flowing background that looks really cool. Okay, basic attribute resistance is bugging you attribute. Like so, compile that, and now we can see that without such crowding with our text, then things look a little more normal. And we wouldn't see name slot in the game. We're going to see what this looks like in game very shortly. Don't worry about that. But things are looking really good. Excellent job. And we'll continue with this in the next video. I'll see you soon. do, but we have the basic attribute menu sort of fleshed out. Welcome back. We're just about ready to start adding this to the viewport to try to see what it looks like. But there's a couple of changes I'd like to make. We're not done with this by any means, but I'd like to adjust a couple things. For one, our scroll bar has secondary attributes, so I'd like this to say secondary attributes just beneath our primary attributes. And this text, primary attributes, has just about the perfect font size and characteristics, so I'm going to copy it and come down to just beneath our scroll box and paste it. So I've collapsed the scroll box. I'm going to select the scroll box, Control V, and there's my primary attributes. It actually looks like it went into the scroll box, and that's not what I want. So I need to drag this out of the scroll box if I can. Let's see, I just dragged it right there. Above the scroll box, I put it outside of it, which is what I wanted. Now clicking on fill empty space lets me put it in the middle. And I'm going to copy one of the spacers and just paste it just beneath that text and then drag it above the text. And I'll click on the text and Control V again to get that spacer there. Now it looks like I'm running out of room, so I think my spacers need to be squeezed a little bit. So I'm going to get this top one and bring its size down. I think we can put it down to about 5, and I'm going to right click and copy its size and just select each of these subsequent spacers and paste in that size. That way the size will be a height of 5 for all of them. And hopefully this will give us more room. So we'll get that one, we'll get this one here, and this one here. And then there's one under, we'll go ahead and paste it there as well. And now we have a little bit more room. Now this text should say secondary attributes, so I'm going to change its text. That looks good, and I just realized this should be above the scroll box, shouldn't it? So I'm going to take the secondary attributes and drag it to just above the scroll box and drag one of my spacers up there. There we go. So we have secondary attributes there, and of course we could take this spacer between the primary and secondary and make it a little bigger. I'll make it 10, maybe 15. And just below the secondary attributes, this one can be 15 as well. Now in my plan, I had progress bars for health and mana down there. We can add that later, but what's more important right now is to have a widget for closing the menu. We need essentially an X button, right? So we're going to add another widget to this. I'd like to collapse the wrap box and put something here in the overlay so it's not in the wrap box. I'd like it right down here at the bottom right. So for this, I'm going to use another size box. So dragging a size box onto the overlay root, we'll get our size box way down there. I'm going to collapse the wrap box so I can see my new size box. And it's way up there at the top right. I'm going to set horizontal alignment to right and vertical alignment to bottom, so it's down here at the bottom. And I'd like to check width and height override so that I can create a larger widget, something like this. So I'm thinking maybe 40 by 40, 50 by 50, something along those lines. And then I'll up the padding for the right and the bottom. So I'm going to try a padding of 50 for the right, 50 for the bottom. That's a little too much. So I'm going to cut it down to 25 and 25. And that looks pretty good. And now my size box can get its own overlay, and then I can have things in it. So let's get an overlay onto that size box. Selecting this overlay, I can now put things inside of it, such as an image for a button border. So I'm going to drag one in. I'm going to call this image underscore close button border. And I'm going to set it to fill for horizontal and vertical alignment. And I'm going to search for border and get my button border. There it is. It's going to be draw as image. It looks good. And on top of that, we're going to have a button. So I'm going to search for button and drag that button onto the overlay. It's going to go on top of the border. We're going to set it to fill. And for its normal image, I'm going to search for button. I'm going to copy the word button, choose button there. And by the way, these are all tinted. And if you don't want them tinted, you can select the tint and drag that value up to white, like so. And I'm going to choose draw as image, so it's not drawn as a rounded box. And I'm going to collapse normal, open hovered, search for button, and get my button highlighted. I'm going to make sure that's not tinted at all. Draw as image and collapse. Next, for pressed, I'm going to search for button pressed, drag that value up for the tint, draw as image, and collapse. And finally, for disabled, I'm going to search for button grayed out. This one already has a full-on tint of white and already has draw as image, basically the properties I wanted all the others to have. And now we have a button, and I just need an X here. So I'm going to drag some text onto it. So here's text. I'm going to drag it onto the button and replace the text with an uppercase X, like so. And I'd like to have this justified in the center. And we'll bring that font size down, and we'll give it an outline size of 1. And I think I'll leave it at Roboto. That looks pretty good. Font size can go down to probably 16, and I think that looks pretty good. So now we have a button. Now I'm going to rename this button to button underscore close, and now we have a close button. And it's looking like it's at pretty much a good spot. So now we just need to add this to the viewport. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it from our overlay widget. And I'd like our overlay widget to have a button. So let's go into that. We'll go to Blueprints, UI, Overlay, and here's our WBP overlay. And I'd like a button here to open the attribute menu. Now, at this point, we're doing a lot of similar things over and over when it comes to adding a button, right? We're adding an overlay with an image, and that image has an optional border, it has the button itself, and it has the text. So a button with all these qualities could really just be a widget itself. So kind of like a red button for a widget, we can make a button for the overlay menu right here. And in the assets, we have a wide button. So if we go into our assets folder, into UI, and to button red, that's the regular button we have. But there's also a folder called wide button red. If we double click that, we see that we have a wider button. So we could just create a parent button widget blueprint, and we can set these as parameters that we can change. And I think that's something that I'd like to do. So let's go ahead and create that widget. I'm going to actually browse to my UI folder, and I'm going to make a new folder in UI called button. And we'll make a button base widget blueprint here. So I'm going to create a user interface widget blueprint, selecting Aura user widget, and this will be WBP underscore button. This will be our base button class. So we know that our attribute menu has this button down here, which is a button with a size, right? We have a size box set to 40 by 40. So for our WBP button, we're going to have a size box, and I'd like it to have the same default 40 by 40. So I'm going to select size box, check width and height override, change from fill screen to desired, and give these values 40 by 40. And in fact, these will be parameters that we can change. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the graph tab. We're going to add two variables, one called box width, which will be a float, one called box height, which will also be a float. We'll compile and give these both default values of 40. And we'll go back to the designer, take our size box, check is variable, and back in the graph tab, we'll control drag it out and set width override. Looks like it's called sizebox 31. So really quick, let's go back and rename this to sizebox root. And we'll take sizebox root and call set height override. And we'll go ahead and hook this up. I'm going to move these two nodes down, and we'll plug in box width and box height, respectively. Hook these up, and we'll collapse to a function called update box size. So there's our box. Now for the button, we're going to want a border, we're going to want a button widget, and we're going to want text. So let's go in to the palette and search for image. We'll drag an image in. We'll select that image and rename it